Talk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Good evening, everyone. Happy 4th of July. It is the 4th of July. It is Tuesday, July 4th, 2023. This is Fade to Black. I'm yours, Jimmy Church. And tonight, live from the UK, Maria Wheatley is joining us for the first time. I don't have an excuse for that. I'm very excited about tonight's show. And I want to let everybody know it is the 4th of July. So we will be hearing and enjoying fireworks tonight throughout the show because I have some crazy ass neighbors and they have mortars. So we'll be hearing a lot of that tonight. It's going to be exciting because it is the 4th of July. I hope that everybody has had a great, safe, fun, and amazing weekend so far. It's a 4-day weekend. And does that mean that everybody has tomorrow off too? When 4th of July is on a Tuesday? Shouldn't you get Wednesday off too and Monday? It should be a 5-day weekend. If I was president, that's what I would do. I want you to help support the show, our news that we do live every single day, all of the hard work. We broadcast 4 nights a week. Get your T-shirts. The links are below. Get your Game Changer membership. Get a Game Changer membership. You also get a free T-shirt, and all T-shirts are autographed. So the links are for everything are below. And of course, you can visit our website and social media. But tonight, it's all about Maria. Maria Wheatley is with us. We're going to be talking about Stonehenge tonight. Well, we're going to be talking about stone circles in general and the long lost race of, well, you know what? I'm going to save that part for Maria, who built it and constructed it and all of that. We're going to be doing that and much more tonight with Maria Wheatley. Her links are below and over on social media. And I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, all the way from the United Kingdom, Maria Wheatley. Welcome. It's about time, young lady.
It certainly is. Thanks for having me, Jimmy.
This is going to be great. And, you know, this is, before I forget, let's just get the first time guest disclaimer out of the way, which is, Maria, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. There you go. Okay, can we proceed?
Absolutely. Proceed.
All right. Tonight is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But even better, in 5 weeks, you and I are going to get to break bread and hang out in Manchester. And I'm excited about this, the Awakening Conference, the Forbidden Knowledge World Tour, bringing everything over to the United Kingdom. We're going to hang out in Manchester. I can't wait. I get to hang out with Maria Wheatley for the weekend. You excited?
Oh, absolutely. Awakening at Manchester. It's going to be wonderful. I've been at the conference several times, and it's always an event.
Okay, this is where I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to get some secret info out of you. Okay? Right now, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Who's cooler? Steve Mara or Vitaly? Who's cooler?
Oh, wow. Well, they're both really nice guys.
Don't be a politician. Who is cooler?
Well, oh gosh, you put me on the spot. I like them both. I'm going to be a politician. I like them both.
Those two guys, man, they are the absolute very best, and I just cannot wait to get over there. But my money's on Mara. I'm just saying. I'm going Mara. Vitali just blew a gasket right now. But I'm going with Mara. I'm going Steve Mara. I'm going with Steve Mara. You know, when what I was talking to Steve last month, and I have the TV. I don't know why this happens, but it's artificial intelligence. But when I turn on my TV in my family room, it goes to UFO and ghost hunting programming, and it's running in the background, right? So I turn on the TV. I'm making coffee. I hear this voice in the background. I turn around and look. It's Steve Mara, and so it's Steve on my on my TV, wearing the sweater and the glasses and going down. And I ended up watching 4 hours of Steve Mara back to back, doing this TV series that he had done. But I just love the guy, his knowledge base, and he's so solid. So I just can't wait to get over to the UK. For you though, I've been following you for such a long time. We have, as you know, we have so many mutual friends. And every time they go over to the UK, so what'd you do? Well, we did this. But then we hooked up with Maria Wheatley and we went over to this, and then we did this. And the things that I have heard of your knowledge and what you, not only areas, but techniques and the history too as well. And I needed to get my piece of that. So tonight I'm going to pick your brain. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do that? I want to start with Stonehenge. And the reason for that, and I'm just going to hand it off to you. But the reason for that, I think that in a general sense, on this planet, like the two big mysteries to anybody inside or outside of our community, it doesn't matter. They want to know about the Great Pyramid and they want to know about Stonehenge, right? That's it. On this planet, it's like the two most significant things. And Stonehenge is right there. And we don't officially, we don't know anything. Yeah, officially, what they teach us in school, what the official side of it. It's like this big mystery, but that's not entirely true, is it? We actually know a lot.
Yes, we do. We really do, because Stonehenge, like you said, and the Great Pyramids of Egypt, they are there. They are a testament to the technology of the ancients that constructed them. And when we come to places like Stonehenge and Avebury, the world's largest stone circle, you're talking about tonnage of stones that were transported to these areas and erected. And then we have to say, why was it erected, and what was its function, and who built it? They're the 3 most fundamental questions about any ancient site.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the movie Spinal Tap, and I'm not making a joke here, right? But
I love that film. Love it.
The film is amazing. And but they, even that film, as funny as it is, and the Stonehenge scenes, they're one of the most quoted scenes in all of Hollywood. But it's the Druids. It's always the Druids. The Druids are the connection there. And if we start back at the very beginning of everything, the Druids probably didn't come on site for a couple of thousand years after it was built, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got lots of different cultures. I mean, if we go back to the time of Stonehenge with Orthodox dating, then you're in the Neolithic period. Then it was the Bronze Age. Then it was the Iron Age from 750 BC to the Roman invasion. That's the Druid period. So
Right.
we're going way, way back to the Neolithic people. And who were the Neolithic people? What did they look like? For example, that's repressed history. because in my research, what I have noticed about the Neolithic people, and I've seen the skulls at Cambridge, I've measured femur bones across the United Kingdom, for instance, is they didn't look like you and I. They were very, very different. They had elongated skulls, for example, and their body proportions were very different. If you met somebody from the Neolithic today, Jimmy, you'd give a double take and think they kind of look like a mythical race, because we have our skulls 1/8 to our bodies. That's the kind of proportions. But in the Neolithic period across ancient Europe, and especially around the spiritual capital of Stonehenge, their skulls were 1/10 of their body. So even though they were elongated going this way, they were smaller to the proportions of their body. So they would have looked kind of mythical. And I've often said that when we look to history, we have giants in history. We have the fae, fairies, the smaller people, and the Neolithic were definitely short. Their femur bones, even the males, were only an estimated height of 5'4", and the women were about 4'9". So they were kind of like a lot shorter. And I am sure that's where the mythology of the Tuatha De Danann, which was a mythical race of Ireland, they were said to be short, quite fairy-like. That's where the word fae comes from. It means fairy. And in that mythology, they descended into the mounds, and all of the elongated people that had these long skulls and were very short were found in the long barrows. So I think that part of our mythological history was down to the Neolithic that looked like the fae. Furthermore, Jimmy, when I looked at the reports coming out of Oxford University and Cambridge by doctors and various learned people, their ear placement was very different. Now, our ears are, we can't see mine through my hair, but they're about here. To the elongated skulls, they were short and they had ears much further back, just like the elfin people. And that is a fact. So a lot of people say, oh, the giants built Stonehenge. It's a Neolithic monument, and it was built by the elongated skull people. The much, much taller Bronze Age people that are found in the round barrows had round skulls. The elongated people were in long barrows that had long skulls.
Okay, now help me understand this. How okay, wait, we got to stop here for a second. If we are talking about elongated skull, okay, I can picture that. 1/10 of a ratio to the body, that's starting to get a little bit strange. Made up for the depth of the skull, so maybe the brain was not it had any less mass, right? But what about the shape of the body? Were they short and stout, or were they thin with the smaller skull?
That's a really good point to get a really good visual about this long lost civilization. They were quite slender, but quite strong as well. They had a lot of muscle capacity as well. That was constantly reported in these reports that were done since the Victorian era, since about sort of the 1900s. They were constantly reported that this is what they were like in the long barrows. And like I said, I've measured numerous femur bones that give this estimated height. But when we look at these people, we need to think they are like a long lost mythological race. And that's where the genesis of the fae or the fairy, the pixies, the elves came from. And that's a repressed history that has been long repressed by the academia.
Fairies are real. I'm not worried about that. Okay, and we'll circle back to fairies. Okay, I love the subject of fairies. But staying on this, and we'll discuss the elongated skulls specifically in a minute. But how were the stones then moved by such a slender race. I understand their strength, but if you go with the dogma, right? The dogma is that it was, potentially a race of giants, and they were able to move and carve and quarry. But if we're talking about the opposite of giant, right? How did this happen?
That's a really good question, and it is the bigger ask. How did the stones get moved? Because some of the blue stones from Wales that were contributed towards Stonehenge, the blue stones, they come from roughly about 120, 130 miles away from Stonehenge. And the very large sarsen stones come from the Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles away. How were they moved? What I've done with experiments with earth energies many years ago now is we put copper probes really into the earth currents. If you imagine you have a ley line, and around that ley line you have earth currents entwining it like a DNA strand, like a caduceus pattern. When I measured with my team the frequencies that were coming out of the ground, they're around about 25 hertz. Now, if ancient man could manipulate sound, and they had the technology in which to do so, and they could make that hertz a kilohertz frequency, then you go to 25 kilohertz, which is the frequency of levitation. So what I think the ancients were doing is they were manipulating the sound frequency of earth energies in which to move stone. It would make it lighter and easier to transport, for instance, could be one interpretation of how they actually moved this tonnage across the landscape. Because when we look at it, Jimmy, all across the ancient world, it was easy for them to move stone, whether it was the Great Pyramids, whether it was Mexico, wherever. And we have 1,000 surviving stone circles in the British Isles. And that's without all of the ones that have been taken away and made ruinous, and agriculture has made them disappear. So in the ancient world, stone moving was easy, and I suggest it was down to the earth energies.
If I go to the UK, again, I'm not making fun here. I'm not joking. If I go to the UK, I go out into the country and I buy myself a couple of 100 acres with a house. Chances are there's an ancient site on that property, isn't there? Right? There's going to be something on that piece of property.
Well, absolutely, because when we look at the British Isles and we go from the south way up to Scotland in the north, you do have like a big, if you imagine a line going right up the British Isles, like the spine of England, that's associated with a lot of stone circles, a lot of monuments, and also a lot of UFO activity is right the way through that spine across the British Isles. So yes, you are surrounded by ancient history here. England and the British Isles especially was a kind of epicenter for Europe. It was the spiritual capital of this place, and that's where Stonehenge comes in. It really was a spiritual capital, like Avebury, which is 17 miles south of it. They were places where people from all over the ancient world came. We know that because you have beads from Egypt found in the round barrows. You have amber from Estonia. It was a kind of cosmopolitan capital in the ancient world.
I was just thinking of the movie. I can't remember the name. I know you do. About, it was 1920s, an estate in London. There's a hill, there's a mound on it, and we're like, let's start digging. And there's a Viking boat, right? and it was one of the most historical, complete boats ever found, and it was a hill on a piece of property that the kids played on, right? And that's what I'm talking about. There's real history there. Now let's back up to the skull people. Naturally elongated, or were they doing boarding?
It seems with the evidence to date that there were a natural race of elongated skulls, but the elite were extending them even further. You know when a skull has been boarded, because you will get scar marks here and here where it has been boarded. So yes, there were natural peoples, a long lost civilization, but the elite were definitely extending them. And in my book, The Secret History of Stonehenge, that will be out soon, I've got photographs of the skulls that have been natural and the ones that have been extended as well. I've done a lot of photography work throughout museums and institutes across the British Isles.
Now, okay. Obviously, when we're dealing with something like this, and we're talking about the Neolithic, somebody had a great piece of knowledge that they were carrying with them. And for these elongated stone elongated stone people, elongated skull, where did they get their knowledge from? And before we say Atlantis, or another technical civilization, that may be the case, but they had a pretty extensive knowledge of engineering, of astronomy, of the art, quarrying, and of course moving the stones themselves. But we're talking about Stone Age man here. So where did the knowledge come from?
I think we either go two ways to long lost civilizations that they came from, or maybe from the stars.
Sure.
What we do know, though, is that these people, you're right, they had an inherited wisdom that included sacred geometry, the ability to make Stonehenge as like a sound temple to mathematical harmonics and ratios. So it's absolutely science after science that was incorporated into one monument, that's Stonehenge, because the sacred geometry there is spectacular. And when we look at the really strange burials from the area, which I have done, I looked at every single burial report ever documented around Stonehenge, and I came to a very, very strange burial. I expect, Jimmy, you've heard of Lloyd Pye's Star Child, for instance.
Love Lloyd. Yes.
Absolutely. It was iconic in its era and still is today. Not far from Stonehenge, you had a long barrow. And for listeners and viewers that don't know what a long barrow is, it's a Neolithic monument. It's a long earthen mound that has chambers on the inside that in its second phase, the skull and long bones were placed in those monuments. That's how the Neolithic buried their deceased. And when I read one report, it said that there was an elongated gathering of people, almost like in a circle, like holding each other. That's very, very unusual for a Neolithic burial, because it normally used to be the skulls and the long bones, the femur bones that went in, and occasionally a whole skeleton. This report said there was elongated people, 3 or 5, that were huddled together in a circle, inside of which was a skeleton that was described very similar to Lloyd Pye's Star Child, where the eyes were on top of the head. It startled the archaeologists, and also it was reported that it had a tail as well. And when I looked to Ted Robinson for some assistance in analyzing this creature, this person, this being, maybe from the stars, or a disabled person, Ted Robertson worked alongside Lloyd Pye, and he ruled out spina bifida. He ruled out certain things and said, Maria, this sounds very, very similar to the Star Child. So possibly in the Stonehenge environs, we have the Stonehenge Star Child.
Do we have a name yet for this race of the elongated skull people?
No, literally, they're just called the elongated skulled people of Stonehenge. It seems that was their capital. That's where they are found in the most numerous numbers.
DNA testing?
DNA testing has been done on the Neolithic and the Bronze Age peoples, and the startling statistics of DNA which were quite interesting, actually. It's by the time of the Bronze Age, that's when the much taller, almost like giants, came over to the British Isles. The DNA then was from the Europeans, but the older ancient Britons, the elongated skull people, by that era, 2500 BC, 95% of the DNA had been eradicated. They were quite often replaced through intermarriage, and a lot of them were ended up being murdered because they have defense wounds and they have wounds to their heads. So there was some kind of battle around Stonehenge around about 2500 BC.
But the origins of the mitochondria DNA from the elongated skull people, was that traced back to a certain part of the Earth?
Well, this is where it kind of halts to some regard. It was traced across probably to the steppes of Russia, but then there's another strand of DNA which is a bit more anomalous, and that's being looked into at this moment. So I think there's big gaps in our history, and that's where people like you and I come in to try and solve these mysteries, which literally are a mystery. Where did these people come from? How did they have all of this knowledge? Why did they build Stonehenge? It's, again, these fundamental questions have never been fully addressed by the archaeological community.
I tell you what I find strange, and then we'll go straight back to Stonehenge. This is what I find strange. Anthropologists, historians will always say South Africa, Africa, Central Africa, the origins of everything, and we migrated out from there. Well, it's getting blurrier and blurrier. And if we go to North Africa, of course, Cairo, Egypt, we have Mesopotamia, and 3000 BC is the number that has been thrown around, the start of everything. That's not the case. And it seems to me now, because of Göbekli Tepe, which is way north on the Syrian-Turkish border there, that's 7,000 years older. And now we are looking at Siberia, where the intelligence is coming from the north to the south. It's not going from the south to the north. And if that's the same thing over in England, and we trace this mitochondria DNA, it flips history completely over. I mean, everybody has been wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And if we look to dating in this country and you go beyond, carbon-14 dating, then Silbury Hill, which is the largest man-made mound in Europe, it's in the Avebury sacred ceremonial landscape. It's a very large mound. It was originally a step pyramid, a bit like Saqqara, where it has steps going up. My friend, John Cowie, and colleague, we're talking about Göbekli Tepe being very, very ancient. Then the carbon dating that John Cowie did coming out of Silbury Hill dated that to 12,000 BC. He did an independent carbon dating, but the archaeologists that did the same carbon dating from that said 2,500 BC. That date that is always mooted, whether you're building a pyramid, whether you're building a stone circle, is always 2,500 BC. So potentially Silbury Hill is older than Göbekli Tepe.
Wouldn't that be great? And see, this is why, and you're right, it takes people like you and me screaming long enough. But that date, right, that 10,000 BC, 12,000 years ago, 11,000, we hear it over and over again. And let's remember and never forget, Göbekli Tepe wasn't supposed to exist. It's 3000 BC, right? We don't want to talk about 4000 BC. And then Göbekli Tepe shows up. And so clearly, and that's 7,000 years. That's a long time. And if that is the case, and different sites, I know that there's going to be more Göbekli Tepes that surface, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Japan, it doesn't matter to me, maybe even South America. The dating is going to continue to get pushed back. There was an intelligent civilization on this planet a long time ago.
Absolutely. I mean, again, in my forthcoming book, people say the first monuments in the UK were the Neolithic. That's what we are told in history. But when you start to look again at the repressed archaeological reports in the Mesolithic, now Göbekli Tepe is a Mesolithic monument, it's not Neolithic, then what was happening in the UK, they had standing stones in the Mesolithic period, and they were broken up to make floors for the long barrows. So we do have much, much, much older monuments, but they were reused and dismantled. And I think when we really start looking with LiDAR and different technologies, we will discover a long lost history throughout Europe.
Now, so what was the purpose? When I was a kid, I'm talking about Stonehenge. When I was a kid, I'm going to say 9, 10. I get a book on Stonehenge and I read, and it was actually pretty complete for its time in the mid 70s. But the stages of building and the blue stones and the sarsen stones and where they came from and the blue stones I never really had an issue with. The heavier, denser, but much smaller. Okay, all right, I can kind of dig that. But nothing about what the site was built for. And to think about how impressive it must have been with the capstones and when it was, first built and crisp and clean and sharp and defined. But what was its purpose?
Yes, I mean, I'll come to that. But what we see today with Stonehenge is a shadow of its former beauty. For example, a little known fact about the sarsen stones, they're the really big stones at Stonehenge. They never seen the light of day until they were quarried. They came from underneath the ground. And so when you have sarsen stone from underneath the ground, quarried out, they have a pinkish hue. So they're very pinkish in color. So the original Stonehenge would have been silvery pink against the contrasting of the deep colored blue stones, which would have looked quite dark. And then the altar stone or stones, we'll come to that in a moment, was green, flexed in garnet and mica. You're looking at a very, very colorful monument. And today we see it all as green, for example. And a fact that is little known about Stonehenge, it's on military land called the Salisbury Plain, surrounded by 16 different military establishments that have no-go civilian areas like Area 51. So these are little known facts about Stonehenge. So Stonehenge was a very colourful monument. What was its use for? If we look back to the 12th century manuscripts by Geoffrey of Monmouth, who wrote The History of the Kings of Britain. It's a very, very famous manuscript.
Yes,
he says in that, no stone at Stonehenge does not have healing virtue. That's the first thing that Geoffrey of Monmouth says. It's a healing temple. Then we're going now from the 12th century to the 16th century and the 17th, where you have antiquarians like John Aubrey and William Stukeley. They constantly report if you mix sarsen, that's the large stones at Stonehenge, with a little bit of water, it becomes a healing antidote. And so people used to go there. And do you know what, Jimmy? I found out through, I'm really lucky in my life. I'm a second generation master dowser. I've inherited manuscripts from master dowsers going back to 1899. And in those manuscripts I've inherited by master dowsers, one of them was quoting from a curator in the 1950s that worked at Stonehenge and was well respected there for 25 years. He was the custodian and tour guide, if you will, in that era. And he said that there was a trilithon there, stone number 51 and 52, for those that want the numerical numbering system. And it had a hole in it that went down 2 feet into that trilithon. Now, the trilithons, for the listeners and the viewers, are the 2 stones in the center of Stonehenge with the capstone on top. About 95 tons of footage is the greater trilithon weight. And it had a hole in it that went down 2 feet. And miraculously, even in drought, even in the hottest British summer, it would be filled with water, and nobody knew where this water came from. It became known as the miraculous healing water of Stonehenge. And people used to go there and form queues and put the water on them. So then what the Ministry of Works did, and the Ministry of Works was the kind of old school government establishment before English Heritage and before Historic England, what they did was they plugged up that very sacred water hole with concrete and plastic. So no longer was the water of Stonehenge there.
So you never got you didn't get a chance to go and
No. No. And so one part of Stonehenge is definitely about, it was a healing temple. It's been documented for centuries after centuries here.
Right.
And the Ministry of Works defaced that stone. And if you go there today, and I take people from all over the world, I've taken Robert Braval, Brian Forrester, all around Stonehenge, for example, and you can still see where the water erosion was going down that face of the stone is an absolute fact. So was that the miraculously healing waters of Stonehenge? I believe so.
I would have taken a bath. I would have taken a bath. I'm down for. So, what do you mean military no-go zone? What? And so, if you're a tourist, you can ride up in a bus, but you can't fly over Stonehenge.
No, it's a military area, so no, you can't fly over. You have to have permission from Boscombe Down, which is a military establishment just the other side of Stonehenge. So what I mean by a military establishment, Stonehenge is the iconic stone temple of the British Isles, but it's on the Salisbury Plain, and the Salisbury Plain is a military area which you can go onto at various points in time. And then if you see what's called a red flag flying on the Salisbury Plain, it's a no-go area. They're testing live ammo, and they're having military exercises. And interestingly enough, all of the really interesting finds, from the Star Child that I've talking about to elongated skulls, guess where they are? In the military area. So it's very difficult to go to these sites to be in that environment, because you can't. It's down to just the military personnel alone.
This is where I go full conspiracy, right? Is what came first, right? Was it the military no-go zone, or the suppression of knowledge, right? Or they didn't want people to find what is existing beyond Stonehenge. You can't hide Stonehenge.
No.
You can't hide that, but you could certainly block off everything else around it.
Absolutely. I mean, I really do feel that this area of sacred landscape that can be transformative. Let us think about when people today, forget about the ancient ancestors for one moment. When people go to Stonehenge today, it can be a transformative alchemic temple. Yeah, where your consciousness is expand. Just like if you go to any temple in ancient Egypt, you're in an altered state of consciousness. That's the first thing that we should realize. And when you go to these areas, they do expand your kind of auric field, your consciousness. And that's a part of it, because even today, when you take people to Stonehenge, as I do very, very often, you can't even touch the stones now. They don't want any contact with you even touching the stones of Stonehenge. It's banned now. It's been banned since 2010. You can't touch the stones. And when in 2010 it was started to be banned, because you used to be able to put your hands against the stones before, that's when Stonehenge was rebooting. I know Stonehenge. I've been going there for 35 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
with my late father and even as a child. So I know when it was coming into its power, heading for 2012. And that was when that point said, you do not touch the stones again, because people get these amazing downloads. They interact with the past at Stonehenge. And that became a point where, no, you can't do that anymore.
Is it possible to get a special permission and have something private at Stonehenge? Is that possible?
Absolutely. I mean, you can. I can book people in to have private sessions at Stonehenge. It's all booked up now, right up until about the end of September, actually. But you can go in there. Historic England allowed groups of 36 people out of office hours to go into Stonehenge, but you still cannot touch the stones. And if you touch the stones, even in private access, which is very expensive, you will get thrown out.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's videotape me getting tossed.
He's loving it.
Well, I had heard that they were keeping people back. I had read that a few years ago, and people were upset about this and the changes that were going on. The tunnel that they were going to did I think they started building that, right?
Well, they've done some rescue archaeology, but they haven't actually started the tunnel as yet.
Right.
But it is planned, and it will.
Planned.
I think it will call a lot of people to protest against that. That's what will happen. There'll be massive protests.
And what we're talking about, everybody, they're talking about building a roadway under Stonehenge, like a tunnel. And I thought one of the most sacred place on planet Earth, and you're just gonna dig. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Now, how did or why should I? Why the perception that has developed with Stonehenge over the years that has this darker side? You mentioned the altar stone, right? Sacrifices and different times of the year, and the gathering, and the hoods and the capes, and this dark, sinister image of Stonehenge. When did that start, and why?
That started really with antiquarians such as John Aubrey in 1666 that said there was the slaughter stone at Stonehenge, for example. But there is no evidence that there was ever sacrifice there. That came much later with a few killings at Stonehenge, but that's not in the era where it was being used. So all of these kind of modern day myths, if you will, do stem from those antiquarians, because they came across the monument and they started to say, oh, that's called the altar stone, that's the slaughter stone. And so it's really based in the kind of 1700s, and it's not really the truth of Stonehenge. But say something enough times and it becomes a truth.
Right.
So you have this perception about Stonehenge which is completely inaccurate.
Now, where are we're going to go back to the beginning again? The lentil stones, which were the ones that were on top, laid on top and connected. It must have been beautiful, by the way. Pink and green stones and blue stones, fresh. Can you imagine how stunning that must have been? Anyway, where are the lentil stones? Right? There's a couple, right? But they're missing. Has anybody found, where are they?
Well, some of the stones went for building material at Amesbury to make the Amesbury church. That's sarsen stones, for example. So some of them got literally pulled down from the Roman period onwards. And there's some interesting antiquarian pictures of Stonehenge where you have more lintels on. But here's the thing, where have some of those stones been taken, and
Right.
who and why? And in my research on the secret history of Stonehenge, what I found was, when you look to one of the first digs ever at Stonehenge was in 1620 by the King, then the King James I of England. He was the king. He had believed to be his lover, the Duke of a very famous duke at that time, and they were looking at the center of Stonehenge with an architect called Inigo Jones, and they found a second altar stone. Now, if you look to the model of Stonehenge, it's one altar stone at the near center, but these people that were there doing the first dig said there was two. Now, the Duke of Buckingham, he said, I want to buy the tallest stone at Stonehenge, which is called the Greater Trilithon. And of course, the landowner said, no, you can't do that. And so it's believed that they took that second altar stone away to St. James's Palace in London. So basically, King James I stole one of the stones of Stonehenge by royal decree, and it's probably still in London itself.
Yeah, man, it's such a nice bench that we're sitting on. Where'd you get this? Stonehenge, man. Everybody's got one of these in the living room. But yeah, I would, again, this is my conspiracy side, right? But I am sure that there are some homes, some palaces on this planet that have a piece of Stonehenge there, a lentil stones, something was carted away. Because when you look at the cartography today and you see how much is missing, now I can understand the reuse, the repurposing of some of that from the Romans, but that's not all of it. And I have heard that some just got stolen and removed.
Absolutely. And when we look to that, even in the 1930s, the archaeologists such as Cunnington, he wrote to St. James's Palace and said, where is this stone? So but then after the 1930s, nobody questioned it again. And they just looked at the normal model of Stonehenge. It's got one stone at the center, and that was forgotten about. But if you go back to the trail, it goes right the way back to James I. And James I, he was quite a strange character to some regard, because he started the witch finding era where, he made people paranoid about witchcraft. But at the same time, the Duke of Buckingham, George Villiers, and his mother were practicing occultists. So at the one time, you've got King James I saying witchcraft is banned, and he wrote the most famous book of all time, the Bible, by the James I version. But at the same time, he was writing demonology. So he was a double character. He was professing one thing, but doing another. So I think the altar stone was used for occult rituals by George Villiers, his occultist mother, and King James I.
King James was double dipping.
He was double dipping. I like that expression.
He was double dipping. Now, if you in this case, let's go with King James, you remove a stone and you put it in your palace, does the energy from Stonehenge now, some of that, does it transfer to the palace? Does King James now possess, or does he believe that he possesses something special, or does the energy stay at the site?
Both, because it's called remnants energy. So, for example, we're at Stonehenge. Some stones have been moved. What in dowsing terms it will leave behind its etheric energy. So it's a bit like a ghostly image of it. So you can douse where stones were and get the width, get the height, because it leaves behind an energy field that you can literally enter and figure out. So yes, it's the etheric image stays behind, but if you transport a stone somewhere else, you are taking part of that thousands of years old energetic field with you. And some of the houses at Avebury, which is 17 miles to the north of Stonehenge, the world's largest stone circle, some of the houses that were built out of the stones from the stone circle were said to have this entity associated with it, where you'd have hauntings and very strange, paranormal occurrences when you build with that stone. So let's imagine now your royalty, you've got a stone there, you're using it for ritual, you know how to activate that stone. And that's where the Villiers were very good occultists. They knew what they were doing, and they did strange rituals for James I as well. James I, his wife, Queen Anne of Denmark, had died, and all of England thought that the king looked really weak and he would die after his wife. And then the Villiers came in and suddenly did these very strange blood rituals with King James, and then it was reported he was youthful again and he was dandy again. So lots of things go on behind the scenes, and if you know what you're doing with the power of stone, then much can be accomplished.
Have you figured it out? Is that how you got your stunning hair? Wait. No, I think that there's some, when you go with folklore and mythology, and we were talking about fairies earlier, right? This stuff is based on something. It's not the imagination just taking off and going somewhere. Stonehenge is a physical place. We can see it. Right, and it's the dogma around it that is misunderstood. But there's the other part, the healing powers, or immortality, right? Youthfulness. I think that this is based on fact.
Absolutely. When we look to, the legends of British Isles and Europe to some regard, they do talk about the Fae, they do talk about giants and much more besides. So yes, that is part of our history. And this is where I think, yes, that there were very, very, very tall people. And yes, there were very, very short people. So when we just talk about giants, we're only talking about half the picture. And this is where I come in holistically and say, but there were all of the people that were talked about in the mythological legends of the British Isles. They were there. They were based on people that had ears further back. And also what I noticed about, their ear placements, and when we look to the anatomy of the ear, it's supposed to have these small bones on the inside, as most modern day human beings have. And that's a fact. You can look that up, you really can. But when we look at the bones in the inner ear of the elongated skulls, they're absent. And that was noted time and time again. So could they hear more different frequencies than we do? And what I noticed was, when I did measurements of the standing stones and the earth energies at these ancient sites, could it be that these long lost civilization could hear the stones? Because they do emit a frequency round about 18 hertz, Jimmy, and you hear at 20. Now, if their ear placements and their bones were different, could they hear the stones and the energies coming from? That's what I think. Their perception of a stone circle was different. We're visual. We look at a stone circle and we see it. I think they heard it.
Now, we're going to take a break in 5 minutes. Okay. So before we get there, the typical, I use the word dogma too much because it just pisses me off. So the dogma around Stonehenge is 3000 BC, right? And some that it was constructed at around 3000 BC, that it's 5,000 years old. I think that is an impossible thing to state as fact. But and then some say even 2000 BC. That the dating is it's only four. When was it constructed? What is your best theory on this? I feel it's got to be much older than 5,000 years old.
Absolutely, that's Stonehenge phase one. Now, when we look to the carbon dating 14 of Stonehenge, which was done by Professor Tim DeVille and Jeffrey Wainwright, the late Jeffrey Wainwright, they found the Holy Grail there, Jimmy. They found carbon, and therefore it can be dated. And the carbon dating came back to about 8,000 BC, and the other piece 2,500 BC. So guess which date they chose that fitted the dogma, to use your phrase. They chose the later date. But that was a fact that we could now transport Stonehenge to 10,000 BC, getting closer and closer to Göbekli Tepe. These monuments are much, much older than we perceive them to be, because it's just in all of the history books that say everything happened in 2,500 BC. Like I mentioned earlier, whether it's a pyramid or Stonehenge, you don't even know how to remember dates. Just remember that one date, 2,500 BC, and you can go across the world with that date.
What did they use? Where did they get what material was the 8,000 BC?
Grain. It was grain that was found beneath the bottom of a bluestone. So once you've gone to because a common perception about Stonehenge is they're in the earth. They're not. They're in solid chalk bedrock. So they got sockets in chalk. We've only got that much soil in Wessex. The rest is chalk bedrock. Highly conductive chalk for electromagnetic signals, and the stones went into that. And if you go to the bottom of the stone, that's called the old surface level in archaeological terms. That's where they found the grain, which is carbon that could have been dated.
How thick is the chalk layer?
Absolutely, really, really, really thick. It's solid. And the thing about Stonehenge that you can't see today, Jimmy, because when you go past the road, it's called the A303, you see Stonehenge by the side of the road. It was surrounded originally by a 10-foot white chalk wall called a henge. So the only thing you would have seen at Stonehenge back in the day would be in the top of the highest lintel. It was a very secretive place. And of course, today it's all been eroded away, and it would have been brilliant white. Like the pyramids of Giza were finished off in white limestone, weren't they? They were brilliant white. That's how Stonehenge was, meaning a wall. So it was secretive. What was going on the inside of Stonehenge, you would have to be invited in to see what was going on. And that chalk was 10 foot high, and it was made out of a solid chalk basin. So what I mean by that is this henge wall was dug out of the ground and made like this, was reported in the 1950s by the curator that I mentioned earlier that saw the miraculous healing water. And he said he was at the dig with Professor Richard Atkinson, and he saw that it was scooped out of the ground laser-like. But Richard Atkinson said it was made of chalk rubble. And so that fact, so-called fact, became mooted, that it was made of chalk rubble. What technology was used to scoop that laser-like out of the ground to make a 10-foot henge bank out of the solid chalk bedrock? We're told antlers. They dug it out with antlers.
I don't want to get off subject, but the Doggerland area, if we push back, and it's not that old, okay, it's not. But there was a land bridge between the UK and Europe. You could have walked from Belgium, right, to London and not get your feet wet. And
absolutely.
most people don't know that. And the population, there were boats. People were transoceanic at 10,000 BC. That's another show. But you understand where I'm going with this. Britain was always, all of it was populated.
Oh, absolutely. We only became an island 6,000 years ago,
Right.
with the Younger Dryas, rising waters, etc. So yes, you could have walked there, and it's believed by a lot of more alternative archaeologists that what's beneath Doggerland is probably monumental. You could have stone circles, maybe even pyramids, for example. Yes.
Cities, shopping centers. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And when I bring up Doggerland to most people, some understand I think that is just suppressed. That's a subject that the historians aren't really comfortable talking about. They want the UK to just stay an island, right? They don't want everybody to know that it was like connected to Europe, and that this was just recent history. It's 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, 4,000 BC. It kind of fits the timeline for so many things, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we will discover long lost civilizations beneath the oceans. Just like sort of Atlantis is beneath the oceans. We will find that there, and I think we'll find even more sophisticated monuments, because one thing that I've noticed in studying megalithic sites across the world is the technology gets worse in more modern times. So if you go back to the first phase of Stonehenge, or the first phase of Avebury, that's when the heaviest stones were moved. When it comes to 2500 BC, Orthodox dating, then the smaller stones are being moved. So if you go further back, the technology is greater. The more the timeline comes forward, the lighter the stones become, and the less technological skills to put them in the ground as well. And you've got to remember, at places like Stonehenge and Avebury, they're only in the ground a short amount. They're not in the ground very deep. It's the technology that was used to place them in the solid chalk bedrock.
Now, the blue stones were added later.
The blue stones were phase one. They were the first to be imported from Wales in Orthodox dating 3000 BC to make a stone circle of 56 blue stones. That's the first phase of Stonehenge. 56 stunning blue stones, so highly polished, they would have looked like the Star-Spangled Sky. So there was dark blue stones, and then the henge, the 10-foot henge, chalk.
Okay, so I got it back. Well, the wood posts were first.
The Stonehenge, you had timber settings going way back. They were dismantled. Then the blue stones were imported, 56 of them, and they were placed in a huge circle. They were then dismantled, and the Stonehenge that we're familiar with, the iconic stone circle, was the later phase of Stonehenge.
Yeah, so all the posts in the chalk layer, those holes are still there from the blue stones.
Yes, exactly. And once you have the in the chalk dug out, it literally is like a jigsaw. You could find the bottom of the stone, and this is what was done to re-erect Stonehenge and Avebury more so. They looked at the base of the stone and thought, well, where does this go at Avebury? Oh yes, we can match it to that socket in the chalk and re-erect it. That's what archaeologists did in the 1930s at Avebury and in the 1960s at Stonehenge.
Let's take our break, and when we come back, can we swing over to Avebury?
Yes, sure.
Can we do some Avebury when we come back?
We would do some Avebury.
Our guest tonight, Maria Wheatley, live from the UK. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Stay with us. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Join us November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2023 as Disclosure Fest Foundation and Fade to Black Radio presents Stairway to the Stars, a Human Origins Science and Technology Expo, live at the Luxor Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. With live talks, lectures, and workshops by world-acclaimed researchers and authors. This is Jimmy Church, by the way, and I'll be your host all weekend long, featuring topics like human origins, ancient technologies, indigenous teachings, workshops, a mass meditation, yoga and sound healing, music, and so much more. Don't miss our intimate sky watch and meteor shower over the infamous Area 51 airspace in Rachel, Nevada, with special surprise celebrity hosts guiding us through the night. Also introducing our Disclosure Fest VR Starship area with dozens of rides. You've got to check it out. This event will sell out. For more information and tickets, please visit disclosurefest.org.
Hey everybody, it's Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge. I want to talk to you about a very special event coming up July 30th, 2023, the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We're going to honor people who have been contributing to the conscious community for decades. People that you know and love that have helped you get to higher levels of thought and consciousness and awareness. It's going to be a live in-person event, but seats are going to sell out very fast. You want to make sure you're there in person, and guess what? You can help vote for the winners. Voting is available on forbiddenknowledge.com, and the categories are going to be social media influencer, podcast/radio host, TV host, actor, director, producer, entrepreneurs, health and wellness, philanthropists, authors, field researchers, archaeologists, space anomaly hunters, and of course, a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be your keynote speaker that night at the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We have celebrity guests performing. We'll have a halftime show where we're actually going to perform music for you. And don't forget about the pre-event mixer, where if you buy a box seat, you'll be in the VIP section, and you also have private access to a VIP mixer with celebrity guests, shake hands, break bread, network, and then walk the red carpet with us and take amazing photos. It's gonna be a night to remember. You don't wanna forget this. Make sure you hurry up and get your tickets because they're selling out very fast. I wanna see you there. Forbidden Conscious Awards 2023.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Maria Wheatley is finally live with us here on Fade to Black from the United Kingdom. We're talking about Stonehenge and a little bit of a recap. I've learned some things tonight, and that Stonehenge, some of the carbon dating pushes back to at least 8,000 BC, which is that's 10,000 years ago. And the Orthodox dating, of course, is 2,500 BC, 3,000 BC. That the site is much older than that and was built by a race of people with elongated skulls. And that is just absolutely fascinating to me. And Maria, continuing from there, I wanted to ask you about using computer technology with star alignments, where we can look at the horseshoe. We know about the winter and summer solstice and the celebrations that go on out there, and the alignment and the photography and the video. I look forward to it every year when it happens. But if we back up to 10,000 BC and start to look at the alignments there, is there something significant that stands out that they would have built it orientated to a specific star system?
There is a star system that would have been quite prominent at Stonehenge, at the center of Stonehenge. If you looked up at midnight at the spring equinox, it would have been a horseshoe-shaped constellation called Corona Borealis that was there. So maybe that was the influence for the later horseshoe, for example. But to the ancient Celts, to the Druids that were much, much later afterwards, that was their goddess of reincarnation, because Corona Borealis was Arianrod, and she was the pagan heaven, if you will. If you were a magician like Merlin, if you were King Arthur, a warrior, or Queen Guinevere, then that's where you would have gone, to the pagan heaven. And that was prominent at Stonehenge. But it's a misnomer when we say that Stonehenge is accurately aligned to the summer solstice sunrise. It's near, but it's not accurate. If you go to the most accurate alignment at Stonehenge for the heel stone, which everybody looks for sunrise coming over at the summer solstice, it's actually the moon's mid-swing position in its metonic cycle, which takes 18.61 years to come back to, and 9.3 years for its standstill. So at Stonehenge, you're at the center now, and the most accurate alignment is the mid-swing position when, at around about the time of the winter solstice, the full moon would rise above the tapering crest of the heel stone, and if it coincided with the winter solstice, it would be blood red at an eclipse. That's the most accurate archaeological and astronomical alignment at Stonehenge. And every single archaeoastronomer knows that.
So we're going to go back to the heel stone for a second, because a lot of we know about Stonehenge. A lot of people don't understand the significance of the heel stone. So let's come back to that. Are you suggesting that the horseshoe was like a Robert Bauval, reflection of the sky down onto Stonehenge? How Bauval theorized, the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau aligns with Orion at 10,500 BC. So is that what you're suggesting the original constructors did with the horseshoe, was to align at midnight with the Boreal? Wow, that's...
With Corona Borealis, and that's what, again, I'm talking about my book. I took Robert Bauval incidentally around Stonehenge, and I know his astronomer that helped him calculate that, Chris O'Kane, and I've worked with Chris O'Kane as well. Now, the moon meant a lot more to the ancient British people, the elongated skulled people, than the sun. The sun was Bronze Age. It was much, much later. And if we go to Callanish Stone Circle, for example, in the Isle of Lewis on the western coast of Scotland, then that's also aligned to the moon's metonic cycle, where it's spectacular. Imagine this, and it's coming up soon. We are about to enter in 2025, especially. A lot of tours will tell you 2024. That's incorrect. When it comes up to the moon's metonic cycle in 2025, and you go to some ancient sites like Callanish, the moon will go across the mountain range, which is like a woman lying in the landscape with her breasts and her legs. And then the moon will go to the center of the stone circle at Callanish. Now, it's called the moon's most southerly moonrise. And if I was stood at the center of Callanish, and I'm an average size woman, and I put my arms out like this, I would be inside the moon. My hands would be touching the outside of the moon. This was discovered by Margaret Curtis many years ago. And because the atmospherics are quite unusual there, then if I put my hands together like this, my shadow would touch the end of the avenue and all the participants there. That is Neolithic drama. And I'll be doing a tour to Callanish in 2025 to witness this, because I had the good fortune of working with the Margaret Curtis at the last moon's metonic cycle there. I was there in 18.61 years ago. So that's the most accurate thing. It's about the moon. And this allows us to grow in consciousness as well. So it's more than just an alignment. It's about us interacting with these energies there, because the earth energies at these sites start to really become empowered at that time as well.
Now, the heel stone and its alignment, right? Let's discuss that for a second. And where is the heel stone positioned?
The heel stone is called an outlier. So if you're at Stonehenge, you have the lintel stone circle with the blue stones inside and the trilithon horseshoe inside of that. And not too far away, you have the outlier, the heel stone, which is a lean-in stone that leans in like that to Stonehenge, which is about here. So you often have in stone circles an outlier stone just outside of the monument, like at the Rollright Ring in Oxfordshire, you have the Kingstone, which is an outlier. It's an integral part of the stone. But interestingly, the heel stone leans as if bowing to sacred space to Stonehenge itself. And it's believed the heel stone was erected first.
It was first, and that's the alignment, right? That's your I was going to say 12 o'clock. You know, when you're looking, that it's the heel stone that is lining everything up at Stonehenge, and it's got to be 200 or 300 yards away, right, from Stonehenge.
Yeah, it's just outlying from the stone circle itself. So it would have been outside of the henge wall, which would, like I mentioned earlier, which was about 10 foot high, and it would have been outside of that. But what we don't see at Stonehenge, because it got ploughed away in 1724, well, it got recorded in 1724 and it got ploughed out. Now, just in front of the heel stone at Stonehenge was a fantastic monument. Nothing exists of it today. It was called the Cursus Monument. And imagine this, a monument 1.75 miles long, nearly 2 miles long, of solid brick like chalk. Imagine a house like bricks. You've got that. You've got a monument nearly 2 miles long, a rectangular monument with 10-foot walls, stood in front of the heel stone. What was that all about? Hardly any researchers even mentioned the Cursus, but that's not the biggest Cursus. The largest Cursus monument in the British Isles was found in Dorset, that's south of Stonehenge, and it was 7 miles long.
And can you hear the fireworks? Did you hear that?
Yes.
I felt that in my booty. Boom! That was a good one. And the avenue that connects the heel stone to Stonehenge, that must have been built first too, as well, right? Everything was pre-planned and engineered.
Yes, the interesting thing about the avenue, it went from Stonehenge and it went down to the river Avon, which for about 1.5 miles. Intriguingly, the avenue at Avebury is 1.5 miles long. The avenue at Carnac and Luxor, 1.5 miles long. It's very intriguing that that's always the distance. But here's the thing. When you come to Avebury, when you come to Stonehenge, Professor Richard Atkinson in the 1960s said it's a processional way. It's where people walked from the river Avon and to enter Stonehenge. But the archaeological reports that really studied the avenue said people were walking on the outside of the avenue, not the inside. And so what was that being about? If humans weren't walking, and same at Avebury, they say the West Kennet Avenue, Alexander Keeler, that excavated that, said that there was compression marks on the outside of the avenue, not the inside. When we go to Charco Canyon, you've got the Great North Road, for example, that links from an area of the mountains coming right down to Pueblo Bonito. And that road as well had the compression marks on the outside.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. And you can look to all of the archaeological reports at Charco. So could these have been energy lines coming in that were very sacred, maybe for the gods, maybe for other beings to walk down, because the humans were going down the outside, is a little known fact. And Alexander Keeler repressed that information about Avebury because he wanted people to see his reconstruction and walk it. But he knew that the compression marks were outside.
Can I ask? Okay, this is a personal question. You're one of the great dowsers in the world, right? where do the rods go craziest? Avebury or Stonehenge? And if you say Stonehenge, do they go nuts at the heel stone?
Well, they both have their own powers, but
Right.
I think, if you're looking for the strongest and you look to the center of Stonehenge, then you're looking to a big vortex there. And when I did a program for the UFO hunters, they were doing a program on vortexes, the military establishments and sacred sites. And they were saying that is a formula wherever around the world you go, you get a sacred site, the military, and a vortex. So the rods do go crazy at Stonehenge. And yes, you mentioned the heel stone. That's very perceptive of you, because that's a focal point for the energy coming in to Stonehenge. Do you see what I mean? So you really get a very powerful reaction there. And I'm one of the few dowsers in the world that have doused 17 different countries now. I've doused all over the world, 17 different countries, and experienced, sites from the ancient Egypt, which I do tours once a year with Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot. And we kind of, interact with these earth energies at these sites worldwide. So each site, Hathor's temple, for example, in Egypt is especially powerful for earth energies, as is Avebury.
Now, we were talking before the show, and I'm just going to, in the interest of transparency for the audience, Stonehenge is amazing, right? It is. But for me, there's a mystery about Avebury. There's something, it seems more significant to me. And I don't want to sound naive, but Avebury seems more mystical to me. Is how I'm not asking for a ranking or a choice, but what's the difference between the use of Stonehenge and its mysticism, its mystery, and Avebury?
Avebury is a ceremonial centre that's 3 miles long, and it contains lots of different monuments. Stonehenge is very alchemic. Stonehenge is transformative, boom, like that.
Right.
Avebury contains Britain's most heaviest stone. It's got a megalith there in the cove that's over 100 tons in weight, estimated. I think it's more like 150. It contains the heaviest stone that was set in the Neolithic period. Avebury is transformative, but in a more gentle way. You have earth currents there called Mary and Michael, and you have lays there. You have spiral energies, earth energies at Avebury as well. And it's a kind of gentle energy, but in that gentleness, it's, again, like Stonehenge, transformative, and the frequencies coming out of the ground are really calming. They're about sort of 7 hertz, like your alpha brainwave. They put you into that alpha mode, so you feel better for being at a place like Avebury. And like I mentioned earlier, Silbury Hill, that step pyramid that was originally 7 steps, a bit like Saqqara, and then it was smoothed off in brilliant white chalk. It was absolutely incredible looking, was a part of the ceremonial landscape. And Avebury itself was the largest stone circle in the world that had 100 standing stones, creating a massive circle called the Great Circle, inside of which you have 2 smaller stone circles. And I discovered many years ago at the Cove feature that aligned to the moon's most northerly moonrise, which is coming up in 2025. I discovered that. And also what I discovered at Avebury, Jimmy, was there's an amazing chair there. You're going to have to come with me. You're going to have to come with me to Avebury. I'll be your personal guide. There's a stone in the outer circle, which is the entrance into that particular part of the monument, that has a seat. And, the Christians were fearful of pagan monuments, so they called it the devil's chair. but you can sit in it. Now, what I discovered there was if you put the henge bank back to its original position, because it was extended 200 years ago, and you were sat in the devil's chair, you would have seen the midwinter sunrise come right up in front of you, and at sunset you'd have seen it set just over there. So it's all about astronomical alignments to the eightfold pagan year, those 8 sacred Sabbats that are still celebrated today, like the solstices and the equinox, Beltane, May the 1st, Lammas, August the 1st, Samhain, the start of the Celtic year, October the 31st, November 1, and February 1. That's the eightfold year, and that was intimately incorporated into the stone megalithic architecture at Avebury.
Now, unlike Stonehenge, you can live at Avebury, right there, and you're not too far from there.
No, I'm in the next market town, just literally just down the road, a stone's throw, excuse the pun. But yes, I'm very, very close to Avebury.
And you can live there. And I have a friend, not going to say who it is, but for a few years, and he showed me, looked on the computer, this aerial view of Avebury. He goes, dude, that was my bedroom window. And he points to this house overlooking Avebury. And I thought, how special, what kind of energy, right? And I was telling you, I'm going to have a beer at the pub at the center of Avebury. There's a town, there's houses, there's homes. What's the energy like? What's it like to live there? The people must be totally special and different.
Well, we do have a saying, I know who you're talking about, incidentally, and I'm not going to name names. But yes, the problem is with earth energies and the stones. Once a stone is rooted into earth energy, it starts to transmit the energy. Okay. Now, some people can cope with that. But in the research over the past 35 years, it's been noticed that if you're in that energy field for too long, it will emphasize your emotions. So if you're happy, you're going to be really high. And if you're down, you're going to be really low. So you have to be really balanced at Avebury. We have a saying there, the light can shine too bright. So people, like maybe the people that you were mentioning, they come maybe as a couple and then they separate. And then people go their own way. And it's the same at Glastonbury, that has lots of different earth energies there. They accentuate it. So you have to be quite balanced all of the time. And sometimes, the earth energies just will take you on a high. So remember this, our ancient ancestors did not live inside of stone circles. Their settlements were miles away. Right. When you look at Stonehenge, people lived at Durrington Walls 2 miles away. At Avebury, they lived 2 miles away. It's so sacred, the energies there, that you can't be around them for too long. You go into the energy zone, then you come away. And you don't stay there.
Well, and so when you're dowsing and you're looking at ley lines, and it's a fascinating map to look at when you look at the whole of UK, Wales, and Scotland, and Ireland, and you see the intersections, and you see even churches too, by the way, right? Where they're right in a row. You can connect the dots. The ancients knew this. Now, did they feel it in their feet? Were they looking to the sky? How did they choose the site for Avebury? And how what's your best guess on this? How did they choose the site for Stonehenge?
Yes, we must remember as well that a ley line by itself isn't the power in the land. If a ley line has 2 entwining earth currents, which are male and female, and at Avebury, you have the St. Michael Ley. It's 300 miles long in the British Isles. Avebury's at the exact center of that ley. But the important thing is the earth currents that entwine it. And you're talking about churches. No, they're not just on that line, Jimmy. On the earth currents that entwine it, every 10 kilometers, you had a church on the Mary current dedicated to Mary Magdalene or the Virgin Mary. That's why it was called the Mary current. And it's the same for Michael. All the churches were on that meandering line as well.
That's right.
as the churches on the straight line. So it's about a ley system. That's called a ley system. And what I discovered in ancient Egypt, for example, is that it has your solar line, which I called the Ra line because it's a solar, and it has 3 earth currents entwined in it. Like one was female, 2 were male, so I called that the Isis current, the Osiris, and the Horus current. They're the power in the land. They are sentient energies, and the ley, incidentally, is where the energy travels very fast. And I've said this time and again for about 30 years. In ancient China, that would be called Shachi, poison arrow. The energy's traveling too fast. That's why in ancient China, they bowed the roofs so that the chi energy flows like this. So the leys, when an agricultural scientist started to grow food above leys and earth currents and more besides, they found that the growth was stunted on leys. So that you again, it's a bit like going to an ancient site. You don't live upon them. It's a fallacy when you hear New Agers saying, "Oh, live at the crossing point of a ley." No way. It's too fast energy.
So somebody with the gift, or with the knowledge, I should say, right? Walking around and feeling, and then you hit the intersection. Was it like, you know what I mean? Like, it's right here. X marks the spot. This will be is that what was going down? That's what I've always imagined.
Yeah, at a place like Avebury, it's where you have the 3 coming together. You have the ley, St. Michael ley, you have the Mary yin earth current, you have the Michael yang earth current, and you have a spiral energy. You don't just have leys. A geodetic power center like Avebury will have more than 1 earth current.
Right.
It's a lot coming together, and plus a vortex and other things besides. That's a power center. The crossing point of leys alone isn't a power center. It has to have more than that. And when the sun and the moon cross the horizon line at dawn and at setting, for example, that there's a geological phenomena that happens, and especially if you're by a ley or fault lines, for instance, and different types of earth energies, then you get a bit like the sea comes in and out, doesn't it? At high tides, it comes in and it comes out. There's a force in the earth that will go in and out, and then it will bathe the megalith in piezoelectrical activity. So they become heightened when something crosses the horizon line. And that's why all stone circles in the British Isles are never more than 1.5 miles away from a fault line, because that will give, that will give that piezoelectrical effect. Do you see what I mean? So again, you have to have lots of fault lines around these places, and then you get all sorts of activity being produced by that fault line.
Now, thinking about this, can you hear it? Can you hear? I should turn off my noise gates. I have noise gates. Man, that is loud. Can you guys hear that? I don't know if you can hear it. It's really loud. Anyway, with all of this, Maria, we've got the UFO connection. And are you okay, Maria?
Yeah, I'm just going to plug in my laptop. It's the plugs come out. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
One moment. Sorry.
I can keep yakking.
Yeah.
There's nothing like live TV. This is how it goes down.
Yeah, and it's
we're gonna turn this part of the show into a meme, Maria. We're gonna post this on YouTube. Just that, but it's the UFO activity, Salisbury Plains and across the United Kingdom. And the connections of this and what has been going on all the way from the northern coast, southern coast. You can go east, southeast, down to Rendlesham, all the way over to Ireland. The UFO activity over the United Kingdom has been extraordinary.
Oh, absolutely. And what it was discovered by a British engineer, he looked at UFO activity and found that it focuses north to south and east to west. And that focal point, again, is Stonehenge. So even UFO activity is very much drawn around the Stonehenge area, and numerous craft have been seen. Just recently, there was a craft seen to be escorted by the military across the Salisbury Plain. It was being escorted. They're not being chased. So I think just like Area 51, you've got back engineered craft in amidst that military activity.
And is the attraction geological, or is it?
It's because it's a geodetic power center that I was describing earlier. When you have all of these types of earth energies coming together as one, so to speak, then you have the UFO activity. It's down to basically like vortex activity as well that can create a huge burst of energy, and that's, I think, what the UFOs are very much aware of in these types of areas.
The can you tell us about? I was researching this not too long ago. I'm going to use the word infamous because it's kind of tragic. The hippies at Stonehenge that disappeared had their UFO sighting, left a letter, a diary, right, a journal, and things were left behind. Are we dealing with an urban legend that has got out of control, or do you think the events happened the way that they were written in the journal and the letters?
Absolutely. I think, people that stay around Stonehenge do see activity after activity. I do, for example, past life regression and other holistic therapies beside, and some people from military personnel from the area, Lark Hill. It's a military establishment a mile away from Stonehenge as a crow flies. And they were chilling out down a trackway at Stonehenge and, having a cigarette and some beer. They weren't drunk. And they said they saw these orange lights come around the car, and they were intrigued about it. They were observing it. They went back to Lark Hill, the military establishment, where they got arrested by the military police because they were absent without leave for 3 days. And yet they thought they just saw one thing, and that happened within a couple of minutes, not days. So the strange things do happen, especially around the tracks leading to Stonehenge. And interestingly, historic England, former English heritage, want to control those tracks now. And I think the tunnel is all about controlling the area. It's not about traffic ease. It's not about that at all.
No, that tunnel makes no sense. And there's a much bigger story there than widen the road by 2 lanes, right? Do that, but the tunnel underneath Stonehenge, no, it just doesn't make any sense. But the disappearing hippies in 1971. You're familiar with that story? What do you make of that? Like I was saying, is that just urban legend out of control, or is this? You think this is all based on fact?
I think when you come to the stone circle phenomena of the British Isles, you do get things happen around them, whether it's appearances or disappearances. For example, during the Dragon Project in the late 70s, led by Paul Devereux and John Steele, they had a whole load of scientists and psychics, a real holistic bunch of people. And the road by that, they saw manifestations. one of the scientists there saw this huge black dog just materialize, and another saw a kind of old-fashioned gypsy caravan. So as much as you have disappearances, you can have appearances. And the road got coined the Spook Road, because nobody liked being on that road. There was something anomalous about it. There wasn't a disappearance, but there certainly was appearances.
I know that you've had, and what a great conversation. I cannot wait to see you next month. It's going to be so great. And I understand the dowsing, and you do your tours and things. But have you had something strange happen at Stonehenge? Have you had a sighting? Have you seen something that you can't explain?
At Stonehenge, I've seen what I believe to be UFO activity, for example, and at Avebury, I've heard the stones. I was waiting for a tour once, Jimmy, and it was on the verge of a thunderstorm. You could hear the thunder in the background. It wasn't overhead, and it was raining very, very hard. And I'd arranged to meet the tour, which was for a company that had 15 to 18-year-olds. I love teaching young people about energies. I really do. And so I was waiting at a particular point inside the stone circle. I'd always waited. And the kids were running across, really kind of excited and saying, Miss Maria, come over here. And I was right by standing stones, and I didn't hear anything. I went over into the outer circle where they were, and the stones were emitting this sound frequency, like, ooh, and it was very, very eerie. And looking back, none of us touched the stones. It was almost we knew that we shouldn't touch the stones. So I've actually heard the stones at Avebury emit a very, very strange sound.
What do you think is causing that? Is it electromagnetic, a source from the earth coming up and vibrating the stones? Are they doing it on their own? Is it the moon? Is it gravity?
When you look to other accounts at stone circles, for example, Avebury's the largest stone circle in the world, which I've mentioned. Stanton Drew in Somerset is the second largest stone circle in the world. And it was reported by a surveyor at that time, General Menzies. He was looking into recording the stones, and he said it was again a grey day where you have that kind of anomalous weather conditions, and he said coming down from the sky was like a spiral that lit the stones up in Wen fire. Now in England, Wen fire is fire that burns cold. It's the witch's fire. And around the stones, there was this like kind of fiery activity. He was a military personnel surveying the site. So anomalous things do happen. But what I've noticed is when the weather is changeable. It's when it's not sunny, it's not a nice day, it's when it's that kind of mottled grey sky.
Very interesting. And the stone, there are the same exact thing goes on in Peru, and it also happens in Egypt as well. And it would just seem to me, not to just. Can you hear that? Can you?
I didn't hear that. No.
It sounds like it's like above my house. It's like you can't hear that. Wow. Wow, that's crazy. That they understood this. They understood frequency. Absolutely. They understood sound. And I forget what temple it is in Egypt. I think it's Karnak. There's this giant, and you can go up and knock on this thing, and it just reverberates. You can hear it. You can listen, and it's giant. It's huge. And you just hit it right at the right, it's just bing, and it just like a bell.
Absolutely. And the blue stones at Stonehenge are designed for that. I mean, if you tap a blue stone at Stonehenge, it will ring like a bell. And I did a show with Megan Fox, actually, about Stonehenge and Avebury for one of her shows. And I said to her, the stones ring like this. And could that change our brainwaves? waves. And so she went to Bristol University and they did a few tests, and the sound of the bluestones, they can change your brain waves. So again, I think the experience of our ancient ancestors at Stonehenge was all about sound frequency. The earth energies combined all of that together, and you have a complete interactive experience. And that's not even concluding with the sacred geometry of places like Stonehenge and the sound frequencies that are the musical harmonics. Because one thing that I did discover recently, for example, was Kepler and Pythagoras. They said there was the music of the spheres and that the planets would create musical harmonics. Yeah. And Pythagoras said the soul could hear that. And Kepler reported that. Well, what I've noticed with particular types of earth energies, they equate to musical harmonics. So if you're walking through Stonehenge in a particular manner, you're interacting with different musical harmonics that are mathematically encoded into Stonehenge, especially particular sounds like the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth as well. So it's not just one thing. Do you see what I mean? These ancient sites have lots of different energies. And when we go to ancient Egypt, which I love going to, I've been to Egypt many times, and then you go to the Sphinx's temple. You know that temple by the Sphinx, for example. When I looked into the musical harmonics of the temple there, it's done to the pentatonic scale, and that's the 5 notes that really resonate, and the music will flow and flow and flow, and so they're musical temples as well.
The Sphinx temple is pentatonic. You know, that's the blues scale, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the blues.
And the great thing about the Sphinx temple is you have what's called a tritone, and a tritone in the scale of C is F and B. So just imagine that you've got 5 notes and then you've got the tritone. And tritones are used in horror movies because they're the music that makes you feel a little bit on edge. And it's called the devil's music to the Christians. They didn't like those tritones because they're a little bit edgy. But at the Sphinx's temple, they create a still point in time, like a portal gateway. That's why it's called the devil's music. They don't want you interacting with this still point in time where you can enter different realms. That's the truth about the devil's music.
Now, the other part with the altar stone, that is a name that was given to it. It wasn't. It's got a very sinister vibe, but there has been no evidence of sacrifice or murder at Stonehenge. It was I don't want to say it was a happy place, but it wasn't a dark place, and there hasn't been any evidence of blood or bones or anything sacrificial in or around Stonehenge, right? I mean, nothing has been found.
No, I mean, for example, the altar stone was called that by John Aubrey in 1666. And when we come to the only person that got murdered at Stonehenge was very, very late. It was the last of the elongated skulled people, and it was a male, and he was shot many times with arrows to his back, and then he fell forward and ended up in the Henge bank. That's the only time. And incidentally, you know, Stonehenge got its name from hanging stones. They thought the trilithons were places where you hung people, so death got associated with Stonehenge on that way. The old Welsh name for Stonehenge was the Giant's Dance, for example, and I think that's because of a very unusual mirage that you can see at Stonehenge. the original way that people used to go to Stonehenge would have been down through the valley. Today, you go along a modern road that's only been there since the 1800s. And at certain times in the summer, when you get that shimmer on the road, like you get that shimmer as you're walking down to Stonehenge, what you would see on a very hot, warm summer's day is the stones dancing up and down. It's been witnessed time and time again because of the mirage effect. So I think that's where it's got its name coined from. But no, you're right. There has been no evidence whatsoever of anyone being sacrificed. The Neolithic did not do that. The Bronze Age did not do that. The Iron Age did. But that was much later.
One day, it's going to happen. It's bucket list. On the solstice, I'm going to be at the heel stone. That's I let the crowds, they can go to hang out. I want to be at the heel stone. That's I want to be there and see that for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good starting point to be at. And originally, the heel stone would have been surrounded by an earthen circle with a white wall around it. The heel stone today looks like it's just isolated, but it been in its own secluded enclosure originally.
Yeah, fascinating. What are you going to be speaking about at Awakening next month?
I'm going to be talking about many different types of earth energies that you get at many different types of monuments across the world. I'm going to go in depth with the musical harmonics and ratios there, and how certain earth energies resonate sound. So I'm going to be looking at different sound frequencies at different temples across the world. And what does that do to us? What does that do to our own consciousness as well? And I'll be looking at very, very powerful lays and their associated sites as well. So I'll be covering a lot of about long lost civilizations as well. And the shamans of Stonehenge I'll be touching about, and what they were doing at Stonehenge, the types of things that they were carrying with them. They had like crystal kits that archaeologists kind of hush about. So I'll be really looking at the ancient world seen through earth energies and lays.
Now, you look like a rock star. Do you play an instrument?
No, I don't.
You're talking all this musical knowledge, harmonics and triads and pentatonic scales, and you don't play.
No, I feel guilty now, Jimmy. I really do. But no, I don't. But I love music. Who doesn't? I love all sorts of music, and I love rock music as well. Good old Guns N' Roses and all of that.
You're from all the. You know what's really funny? Okay, yeah, we got Guns N' Roses, we got Van Halen, we got Aerosmith. But it just seems like it's a very strange. I don't know if it's the water. I don't know what it is, but Zeppelin, the Stones, and Judas Priest, and Black Sabbath, and on and on and on and on from that island that used to be connected by the Doggerland. There's something going on with the water over there. Listen to the thunder. Man, that is crazy. All right, Maria, I'll see you in a month. Thank you so much. Where can everybody reach out to you?
Yeah, you can go look at my websites, which are my teaching platform for all of my courses in dowsing and many other subjects besides, is esotericcollege.com, and my tour platform and all my dowsing workshops can be found at the Avebury experience.co.uk.
There you go. The links for everything are below. Maria Wheatley, be safe. I'll see you in 5 weeks.
Happy July the 4th.
Happy 4th of July to you too as well. You know what? I hope you guys aren't still too mad at us that we took this place from you. So there you go. Happy 4th of July. I'll see you in 5 weeks.
Bye.
Maria Wheatley, thank you so much. What a perfect show tonight. I learned so much. And what have we got going on tomorrow night, everybody? Does anybody know? Let's see. Tomorrow night. Oh, Chris Stiles, Shag Harbor tomorrow night. Maria Wheatley tonight, Avebury, Stonehenge, Elongated Skulls. That is just absolutely incredible. Thank you so much, Maria. And there you go. So I'll see everybody tomorrow night. And again, happy 4th of July. And now go and celebrate. And I'm going to go outside and check out the fireworks. Fade to Black is produced by Bill J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Dennis and Kevin. Webmasters Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll see everybody tomorrow night with Chris Stiles right here. Until then, I want you to be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.